All right, y'all, here's for the finale.
Nero was the first Roman emperor to persecute Christians. Others were to follow in his footsteps. In the 1st century, the emperor Domitian, AD 81 to 96, also unleashed his fury on the church in the final year of his reign, AD 96. It was Domitian who banished the apostle John, by then an old man and the last surviving apostle, to the island of Patmos, just off the west coast of Asia Minor. See the end of the chapter.
I have an article I want to read to you guys, regarding good old Domitian and the claims made about him. And I want you guys to really pay attention. Listen, please pay attention and listen. It's an article for the Biblical Archaeology Society by Mark Wilson, and this is from May of last year. Alternative facts. Domitian's persecution of the Christians. So Mr. Mark Wilson says, as I revisited a critical biography of the Roman Emperor Domitian by the scholar Brian W. Jones recently, I was reminded that alternative facts and fake news are not just a contemporary phenomenon. On occasion, ancient writers similarly tried to spin their version of the truth. Go figure. Jones tackles the familiar line that Domitian, who reigned between 81 and 96 CE, that's Common Era, but we'll stick with AD, was a great persecutor of Christians. This fact is now standard stock in much popular writing on the book of Revelation and is even found in some scholarly tomes. Notice he says some scholars, not all scholars, not even majority of scholars. Like some dispensationalists will lead you to believe. They love to use lines like that. Most scholars, man, they don't even read scholarship, so knock it off. If you want to say scholars of your particular view, that would be honest. But to be like most scholars, that's dishonest. In his discussion, Jones carefully rehearses how this fact developed. Eusebius in his church history provides the first reference to Domitian persecuting the church. Writing over 3 centuries later in the early 4th century Common Era, or AD, this ancient Christian historian first quotes Melito of Sardis, who mentioned that Domitian brought slanderous accusations against Christians. That's Eusebius's Church History, Book 4, Chapter 26, Section 9. He also cites Tertullian, who claimed that Domitian was cruel like Emperor Nero, but that Domitian was more intelligent, so he ceased his cruelty and recalled the Christians he had exiled. This is in Book 3, Chapter 20, Section 9. Eusebius also quotes Irenaeus. This is the strongest piece of evidence that they love to use. Eusebius also quotes Irenaeus, who claimed Domitian's persecution consisted only of John's banishment to Patmos and the exile of other Christians to the island of Pontia. This is in Book 3, Chapter 18, Section 1 and Section 5. And I've gone over that quote, and I've talked about the discrepancies of that quote, what is debated about that quote. And again, you'll have to search my page. I believe it's in my Revelation Complete Study playlist. Now, despite these cautious statements by 3 early authors, Eusebius then spun his own alternative fact by claiming that Domitian, like Nero, had stirred up persecution against us. The Anekini Diogmon. That's Book 3, Chapter 17. From here, the tradition was enlarged by Orosius around AD 420, who in his History Against the Pagans wrote that Domitian issued edicts for a general and cruel persecution. That's Book 7, Chapter 10, Section 5. Despite a lack of evidence, Jones observes that the tradition concerning Domitian's persecution persists. Said it persists from a frail, almost non-existent basis. It gradually developed and grew large. Thus, the alternative facts sown by these ancient historians grew to a truism of Christian history. So all you folks that like to stand on that late date that Domitian exiled John to Patmos, there's no real evidence of that. No solid evidence of that. Only supposed statements. And when you stop just accepting what your favorite Bible teacher said and just believing what they said, and you decide to actually examine what they said, look into what they said to see if it is true, then you come to find out it ain't true, but it's been said for a long time, and so it has become a truism. You know what else is like that? The rapture. No pagan writer of the time ever accused Domitian, as they had Nero, of persecuting Christians. And I can absolutely tell you, Eusebius had a lot to say about Nero and his persecution. However, when it got to Domitian, there was very little. A couple of statements, no proof, no specifics, just words. Tacitus, Suetonius, these aren't even Christians. These are Romans. These are Roman government folks that happen to write histories. They had a lot to say about Nero and his persecution, what he did against the Christians, the ones called Christians. Not a whole lot about Domitian in regards to him persecuting Christians. You actually find out Domitian was cruel, but he wasn't cruel against the Christians. He was cruel against those of the aristocracy, those in the same position as him. So what I'm about to read right here is going to make a lot of sense to me. Pliny, for example, served as a lawyer under Domitian and wrote in a letter to Trajan that he was never present at the trial of a Christian. This is a strange claim from one of Domitian's former officials. If Christian persecution were so prevalent, I mean, and really, that's just common sense right there. The archaeologist Julian Benet, who has written a biography of Trajan, also fails to mention any general persecution of Christians at this time. Domitian's execution of Clemens has sometimes been linked to the senator's apparent atheism, a term sometimes given to Christians. However, there is no smoking gun linking Clemens' death to Christian persecution. So Jones concludes no convincing evidence exists for a Domitianic persecution of the Christians. There's none. There's none. And if you try to fit Domitian's name, Domitian's name did not sum up to 666. John very clearly says that the number is of his name. Domitian clearly does not fit the sixth king in Revelation 17. Nero does. So why is Domitian's legacy so clouded in the ancient sources? Domitian's assassination in 96 AD brought an end to the Flavian dynasty, which started with Vespasian. Nero was the end of the Caesar dynasty, and the dynasty founded by Nerva, the next Roman emperor, lasted until the 3rd century CE or AD, because Domitian had offended the aristocratic elite. The Senate ordered the damnation of his memory, even though Suetonius, in his writing on Domitian, chapter 8, section 1, stated that Domitian carefully and conscientiously administered justice. Later writers, such as Dio Chrysostom, perpetuated his damaged reputation using alternative facts. So they did him like they was trying to do Donald Trump. Jones writes as a Roman historian outside of biblical studies, but a New Testament scholar has similarly articulated this view. So Jones has no dog in this fight. He has no point or no agenda to set out to prove the early date of Revelation. No bias whatsoever. He's simply observing actual history. Leonard Thompson notes that a more critical reading of Eusebius raises doubts about the widespread persecution of Christians under Domitian. Again, nobody disputes the persecution under Nero, and that he was the first to do it, and that he was a savage about it too. He concluded that most modern commentators no longer accept the Domitianic persecution of Christians. Some writers consider Revelation as a source for persecution by Domitian, although John never identifies a specific emperor. Actually, he does, but he identifies Nero. Revelation chapter 17. It only makes sense if he's talking about Nero. If so, then Revelation would be the only ancient source pointing to such a persecution, which we know is not. It's been over 2 decades since 2 Roman historians and a Revelation scholar have pronounced the Domitianic persecution moribund. In other words, no serious scholar believes it. It's dead. It's a dead point. It's not true. Such claims continue to circulate in articles, books, and sermons, though. This shows how long it takes to repudiate alternative facts that have circulated for over 1,500 years in Christendom. So shame on all you so-called brothers telling me I was wrong for not holding to the late date. Instead, sticking to the early date, because that's where all the evidence is.